The Sustainable Voice, bringing you big successes from small places worldwide.
Welcome back to Sustainable Voice. This is Ashish, and we have a new friend on today. Hi, Annie.
Hi, how are you?
Welcome to my podcast.
I'm so excited to be here.
So, as you guys can tell, Annie and I are really good friends. And this topic today, I really wanted her to join us because it is the most politicized topic out there. And everybody who talks about this topic knows, pardon my French, jack shit about it. So we're going to actually go through and talk about this because Annie's got a really cool organization called Travel for Better. And so she's a practitioner as a travel advisor on the luxury side. And she's also somebody who is standing up for these rights, standing up for this. Now, this is not one of these bleeding heart climate change podcasts and, oh my God, we're all going to die. It's not that. So don't worry. Don't change the channel yet. It's okay. Before we jump in, though, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that bell notification. You know what to do. Feed the algorithm. It's absolutely necessary. We're adding record numbers of downloads, record numbers of followers, more than we ever have. Which is really cool. So thank you for that. Thank you all for joining us on this. So Annie, what we want to talk about today, we're not talking about climate change. We're talking about climate data.
Yeah,
What do you think about that?
climate data. I think it's great. I love not calling it climate change because it's so much more than a change.
Yeah, that's
It
right.
affects so much more than just the world changing. It's bigger.
Yeah, exactly. And here's what I'll say for we have a lot of listeners that will look at this and say, well, okay, hold on, what proof do you have? Why do we call it climate change, climate data? Can we all agree that something is happening? Can we all agree that there is a shift occurring? The hurricanes across where I live have gotten bigger and stronger. The
Hmm.
temperatures across most of the world have gone up. The continental shelves on the different poles are falling. They're melting. Can we all admit, at least, that something is happening? I don't care what you call it. Annie, you good with that?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's ignorant to say otherwise.
Right. Somebody will say, "Well, no, it doesn't impact me. I'm living under in my little. It doesn't affect me in my house." Well, how's your electric bill? How often are you running your AC? All right.
Hmm.
So there's that. So we're going to call this climate data because it is reshaping luxury travel. It's not. This is not one of these, net zero 2050 campaigns. I see that, and I got to tell you, part of me is like, okay, that's really cool, but really 2050? That's how long it's going to take? I mean, I'm almost 50 right now. So in 2050, I'll be, 70? Here's the thing. I've pretty much jumped off every bridge. I've jumped out of every plane. I've jumped off every building. If you can name a bone, I've broken it. At 70, I'm going to have a whole lot of other problems besides this. I'll be lucky if I can walk.
You'll have bigger
Uh,
things to worry about.
well, yeah. Well, as I've told my children, I changed their diaper when they were a kid. When I get that age, hopefully they'll be changing mine. So there's that. So Annie, let's frame this in the Travel for Better Foundation. Tell us why you started Travel for Better.
Yeah,
Wh-
so it was primarily created to support travel advisors and travel businesses who believe travel should be a force for good. So we're focused on helping travel professionals find really practical ways of working that, support communities, protect destinations, strengthen local economies without making their jobs harder or compromising that client experience either.
And what's been the reaction so far? And full disclosure, you were gracious enough to invite me to join your board, which I was honored to. What's been the reaction so far from the agency community and the industry as a whole?
Yeah, I think it's been really positive. A lot of the comments that we're receiving is that people feel like they've been very alone in this push to make travel a more sustainable industry. And for people to find our community has been a really positive one. And they're finding like-minded people to share insights with and learn from. And sustainability is not something that should be gate kept. It's meant for everyone. So it's been a really positive reaction that we've had so far, which is great.
Very cool. And the broad stroke of this episode, and I can already see people rolling their eyes right now, like, oh, here we go, sustainability, that S word again. Well, to
Uh-huh.
them, I say, I have a different S word for you. Just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding, guys. Don't kill me in the comments. Don't worry. But really, when it comes to it, the overarching theme that we want to ask, and it's one that you and I have talked about in the past. It's we've done episodes on a lot of different topics, and I can't believe in almost 100 episodes we've done, this is the first time we've actually addressed this head on. Can luxury travel be part of the climate solution, right? So not climate change, but climate solution, or is it actually part of the problem? And that's as we go through this conversation, that's what we're going to try to answer. That's the overarching question we're going to try to answer without giving. Normally you hear these kinds of conversations and you get done, you go, I'm no further ahead than I was before. Here, hopefully, we can move the needle. So, Annie, I'll ask you this. With the fact that we have record-breaking heat waves all over, it's reshaping the way tourism is done in Europe and other parts of the world. You've got what's it cool? Is it called coolcations? Have you heard this before?
Ah, yes, the coolcation, the
What
rise of the coolcation.
what the WTF is a coolcation?
I mean, I'm certainly seeing it more with my travelers too. The coolcation is, moving away from those southern destinations, especially in Europe. You see it a lot. So, moving towards northern destinations like in Scandinavia or Iceland or northern Canada,
Mhm.
Greenland. To avoid the summer heat. So it's definitely a big trend for sure.
Okay, so if that trend's occurring, then with the broad question that we're trying to answer, what does that mean? What are some steps that are being taken to be able to actually say, okay, these locations are occurring, but how do we make them responsible? How do we make sure that they're not destroying where they're visiting, the new places? We see that the protests that are happening in some of the southern parts of Europe because of overrun in tourism. Is too many people part of the problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely need to be directing people away from these like peak summer destinations. One of the questions I always ask on my client intake form is, when do you typically like to
Mm.
travel? And more frequently than not, clients are checking that box for low and shoulder season, which is really great.
Wow.
So that certainly opens up the conversation too and gives you an in to kind of talk about it with them. But for those people that are, confined by school schedules and, they only have that time frame to travel in, you look at just trying to send them other places to alleviate those huge crowds that you're seeing in places like Rome and Athens and Sevilla and all of
Mhm.
these destinations that are just getting overrun with tourists in the summertime. Because in the end, it's going to give the client a better experience if they're not
Right.
in those crowds too.
Well, that's interesting. You're probably the first person that I've actually heard say this, which is reason number 1,550,000 why I admire you. Um, so you mentioned this, that you actually have an intake form that talks about this. Okay, so
Mhm.
yeah, Virtuoso did this Lux report in 2026. I'm just reading it off of my page here to make sure I have it right. It found that 76% of their travel advisors reported an increased client interest in off-peak, cooler destination travel. So you're saying you're seeing that as well?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think maybe not directly asking for a cooler location, but it's definitely part of the conversation.
Okay, so then that brings up a separate part of it. So you touched on this. So climate conversation, right? Again, we're not calling
Hmm.
climate change. Climate conversation. It's part of your intake process, right?
Hmm.
Uh, okay, so tell me more. You touched on it, but tell our listeners more about this. And by the way, to everybody listening right now, you're about to find out why Annie is as smart as she is. Watch. Wait. I've always wanted to say this. Watch this. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think as a travel advisor, we kind of have to read between the lines a little bit a lot of the time. So I think in terms of clients bringing it up, for my clients, it's probably about 50-50 that they're bringing up climate
Mhm.
or temperature or crowds. Since I have a focus on sustainable travel in my own business, I think a good number of my clients are more conscious about their environmental impacts. I think for most travel advisors, the answer is probably that their clients maybe aren't directly asking about it, which is totally fine and that's really normal.
Sure.
What I'm seeing more often is travelers asking about their comfort level. So they'll ask, is it going to be too hot, too crowded? Or if they're going to have trouble accessing something they have their heart set on or that's on their bucket list. So I
Is
think
too crowded as part of the response now? They're intentionally asking about that now.
yeah, I think so
Wow.
because you see it a lot on social media, the TikToks and the Instagrams. And, when people are in these destinations in the summertime, you see like people popping up on stories. Well, my friend went to, Italy last July and it was
Mhm.
really crowded. So it is becoming more of the conversation. And I think the climate risk is often kind of hidden inside of those questions, which means we as travel advisors increasingly have an opportunity and a responsibility to raise that topic even when our clients aren't. So that doesn't mean you have to hit that topic head on, but it just presents a real opportunity for you to steer the conversation towards other seasons or other destinations.
Mhm.
And, putting it in my intake form is a really easy way to, not have it feel like a polarizing conversation with someone, and just gives you a really easy in to start that conversation, I think.
And I think it's absolutely amazing that you're doing this because you said it earlier, right? Even under the travel for better, the most common response you're getting is, "Thank goodness I felt alone. I felt like I was the only one with this message. It's good to know others believe in the same thing."
Yeah.
And this is not just a Europe thing. This is pretty much worldwide. I know for our destinations, for example, we have people that will go on safari now in off season. Even if you're on the
Mhm.
equator, they want to go in off season just because of crowds. They don't want to be near the crowds. We have people that will go into other parts of the world in South America and say, "I don't want to go when everybody else is going. I want to go a different time." I'm going to ask you a question that I know I'm not supposed to ask this, but have you ever personally rejected clients or redirected clients from a destination because of overcrowding or climate risk? And if you did, what does that conversation look like?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever outright rejected a destination, but I've definitely tried to redirect the conversation and get them excited about alternate destinations, because I think there's a real opportunity to give them exactly what they're looking for, just
Mhm.
in a different place. So, for me, in terms of, redirecting, I think it's really up to us to decide, what kind of experience do they want? What is that going to look like? And where can I give that to them that matches what they want with something that's, going to have a positive impact as opposed to a negative one.
Mhm.
And the other interesting part too is that, a lot of destinations, it's all based on seasonality. It's not
Right.
just like you can't go here ever. I just had a conversation with someone the other day saying, like, oh, we're really interested in going to Spain. Okay, when are you thinking you might want to go? Well, we were thinking maybe June. It's like, well,
Right.
what about April? Like, are you,
Right.
no, we're not opposed to that. Like, great. Well, it'll be a little less crowded. The weather's still really nice, so it's just about kind of redirecting the conversation.
But that makes sense. And and a follow up to that actually, and it's something you and I have talked about in the past. There's this common, I don't want to say conception or misconception, but is the luxury travel aspect, is it part of the problem or can it be part of the solution?
I think it's a little bit of both. It's all about education. As luxury travelers, we can have a really significant impact one
Hmm.
way or the other.
Hmm.
Because in luxury travel, you're inserting so many tourism dollars into a destination. I think we just have to be really intentional about what we're doing with that money. So, yeah, I think, any trip is going to have some kind of carbon footprint.
Sure. Yeah.
I think we can't ignore that part of it. And we shouldn't pretend otherwise. But, I've seen firsthand how luxury tourism specifically can, fund wildlife conservation.
Hmm.
We can support local economies. We create jobs. I mean, big five is a big part of that too. And preserve cultural traditions that might otherwise disappear. So I don't think, it's about whether we travel or not. It's how we travel and who benefits from it.
Right. You know what? And it's so interesting when we start looking at this. I mean, and again, you and I have talked about this, right? There are ways to do it, right? So I remember I had a conversation with somebody. It was it was at a conference, and this was an advisor. He was new to the business, and he was at conflict with himself. Right?
Mhm.
He was going on about how he was both part of the problem and part of the solution, and so he was at conflict with himself. And then the conversation went off the rails at that point, right? And what it ended up being was this, and with these, you've been in these conversations, right, where you get
Oh
out and
yeah.
you're like, okay, well, everybody feels like they're going to die in the next 5 minutes. right? Or
It can feel really heavy.
yeah, you come out, you just feel guilty. Like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
you know what? I'm gonna walk on the highway and I'm gonna pick up every piece of trash along the highway while I go, and I'm gonna,
Hmm.
say goodnight and blow a kiss to the moon every night before I go to bed, and blow a kiss to the sun every morning when I wake up. Like, okay, that's all well and good. Like, that's not, and if you do that, that's great. Don't let me judge you.
No,
Um,
no hate.
but yeah, no hate, exactly. I just realized that. I'm like, maybe some people actually do that. So I don't know. If you do that, I see you. You're cool. Don't worry. We're good. We're good. But have you ever, with Travel for Better and also as an advisor, have you ever felt like there's two parts that you're trying to reconcile? Has it ever felt like that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really one of the reasons we're doing what we're doing with Travel for Better. We wanted to help advisors move beyond like their good intentions and actually understand how they can have a positive impact on, their day-to-day businesses, on their clients, redirecting tourism dollars in a way that creates
Uh-huh.
positive outcomes so that it doesn't become this big, heavy thing for you. And I think a lot of what we're doing, we really promote progress over perfection,
Sure.
because a lot of us doing a little bit is going to have a huge impact rather than one person trying to do everything perfectly. So
Uh-huh.
I think in everything that we do, we're really promoting progress over perfection. And I think it's just important to have that mindset that it doesn't need to be this heavy thing. We
Right.
know these are big topics that we're talking about, and you're not in it alone. And just do one thing, just start with one thing, and then it'll become easier and kind of grow from there.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's part of it is, and I think what you just said is exactly right. It's do one thing. You don't have to
Hmm.
do everything. Just do one thing. I keep
Yeah.
thinking, it takes me back to when I first moved here from Kenya. The first show I watched was Knight Rider, and I walked into my grade school class and told my teacher my name was Michael Knight. And all I could think of is basically that ending scene. One man can make a difference.
But it's true.
It's true. It's true. My gosh, Devin Miles was right. So
They had it right all along.
I know. So we're talking about now the industry's responsibility as a whole, and I think you and I have talked about that for Travel for Better. The fact that it is about the industry's responsibility. You and I have been in those same conversations where everybody wants to do something, but nobody wants to start. They just look around and go, "Do something." Oh no, no, not
Hmm.
me. You. No, 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 not me. Do something. Like we've all been in those conversations, but it is about the luxury sector, and not just in travel, but in general, the outsized carbon footprint, and
Mm.
its outsized influence. And I want to just take a second and say, when we talk about the carbon footprint, we're not talking about simply just saying, "Oh, look, we're carbon neutral." That's not what we're talking about. We're going to have Jennifer on again for an episode talking specifically about that, because we talked about it before.
Amazing.
Just simply talk about, oh, well, I'm carbon neutral. Great, fantastic. You wrote a check, and
Like,
so
okay.
okay, good for you. Cool. Here's your pat on your back. But we're talking about, okay, so what you just described in terms of shoulder season travel, attitude shifts, locally indigenous owned lodges. I mean, that's the basis, for example, for our jobs algorithm, right? Who owns the
Hmm.
hotel? How many jobs does it create? Who owns the transport company? How many jobs does it create? All these aspects that come into it, right? All these aspects that are a main part of it.
Hmm.
So as we're going through this, that's part of, when we look at, for example, the smart design. We're talking about climate smart itineraries, right? When you look in all these things,
Yeah.
that's the notion. So has that? How do you? We talk. Go back to the conversation you're having with your travel with your travelers, and you're
Hmm.
talking about these attitude shifts.
Yeah.
Do they come away understanding that you're just being smarter? We're not asking you to save the planet in one fell swoop. We're basically asking you to take small steps. How does that conversation, or how does that conversation go deeper in those intake calls, and even other calls?
Yeah, I think I don't necessarily come at it from a direct standpoint because I think it has become really politicized. And I think
Uh-huh.
a lot of that conversation almost happens after the trip. because you
Hmm.
have that conversation and they say, "Oh, we had this really incredible experience with someone from a local community that we had a cooking class inside someone's home and we got to meet their family." And you kind of are given the opportunity to point out, hey, like you're having a real impact on that community, on that destination you know, by us designing your trip that way. So that conversation, I feel like almost happens after the trip has occurred, after you've already inherently, kind of baked those things into the itinerary. On the front end of that conversation, I think it's really just about reframing and educating. So instead of
Right.
saying like, don't go somewhere or not to travel during peak season, you just say, well, hey, here's an even better way to experience this destination. We can do it this way instead, or, do these things differently. And I
Hmm.
think clients are usually way more receptive when they understand the recommendations that we're giving are actually improving their experience.
And I've actually been on one of these calls with you. I've seen you do this. It's remarkable. We were talking about Egypt,
Mm,
and we were on a call with one of your clients, and we were talking about the local economies. We were talking about not going when everybody goes. We were talking about just going a week before. We were
yeah,
talking about skipping the time when the eclipse is occurring, going a little bit later, and what it means. We were even talking about going on a cruise versus going by land and actually spending more time in the hotels because of their
yeah.
practices. We spent a good amount of time talking about local archaeologists as well.
Hmm.
So I've seen this in action, and that actually leads into the travel for better, the founding mission. Do you want to talk about that a little bit in terms of why you started it?
Yeah, yeah. I think, we want to be able to uplift those communities and we want travel advisors and travel professionals to really lean into these things so that, we're preserving these experiences that our clients know and love and that we know and love as travel professionals. We're part of it too.
Right,
We have a baseline, 101 course if you feel like you don't know where to start.
right.
It's a virtual self-guided course that you can go through and talks about all of the UN SDG goals and gives you a baseline understanding and, kind of helps set up the foundations of what that looks like in your day-to-day business. So
I love how you put that forward because I've been through so many of these courses. Not even say course is the wrong word, but these organizations. Well, we'll give you the resources, and then it's just this novel, and it's getting into the metric tons, it's getting into the CO2 output, it's getting into everything else, and you're kind of stopping and saying, look, the crux of this is how do I apply this to my business? Right?
yeah.
How do I actually put this through? I'm working, I do a lot of public speaking, and I'm actually working with somebody right now to elevate that even more. And one of the first things that they've talked about is you've got to understand the crux of what your audience really wants, right?
Hmm.
What their take home value is. And the take home value isn't always a business case. It could be an emotional case. It could be a motivational case. It could be a personal case. It could be a relationship case. It could be a business case. It could be an environmental case. You name it. But there's some element to take home. And I think what you've just summarized there really, that last part of that statement, how do I apply this to my business? Where does the rubber meet the road, right? You and I have sat into these lectures where somebody goes on waxing poetic for 5 hours about all the different ways. You come out and go, I just went in a circle. I feel like my head's
Oh
been in a
yeah, like
washing
what did
machine.
I just listen to?
Right. Did I know less now than I did going in, or I've lost brain cells listening to that. Or you listen
Yeah.
to something. I remember I was in one of these meetings. You might have been there too. I am a vegetarian. I don't eat eggs. I'm allergic to nuts. So if anybody wants to get a hold of me, just give me some nuts, and you'll get even with me pretty quickly. Um, and somebody was in front of me or behind the room and said, "We should all be vegetarian and be sustainable." And I remember I stopped and I
Oh
looked at the
yeah.
person in front of me and I said, "I am vegetarian. Even I know that's not correct." And it's not.
Yeah.
I wasn't shaming the person. I did go up to her, nothing like that, right? I mean, but it's not to shame that person, not to make them feel bad. It's more so that it shows the state of where some people's understanding is, and that the
Yeah.
understanding doesn't mean you got to memorize all 17 SDGs. The understanding is, okay, how do I apply it to my daily life and a business? Does that mean you all run out and buy EVs? No.
Well, and I think it's about how you emotionally connect to it too, like
Right.
figuring, okay, there's 17 of these things. Like
Right.
I don't think there's any person that is going to connect to all 17.
No.
That's wild.
No.
But it's about learning them, understanding what they mean, and then finding,
Right.
where you and your business kind of fit into that larger picture. And
Right.
again, progress over perfection, figuring out, okay, I feel like I can have a real impact on maybe this goal or this goal.
Right.
Because I think if you try to address all 17, you're
You're never
not
going to
really
get
going to
anywhere.
get very
No,
far.
you're not going to get anywhere. If you address one or two and do them well,
Yeah.
that's really what it comes down to. This is so important because I love where this is going. We're talking about this whole part because if somebody doesn't understand their emotional connection to it, and you and I went through this. That's how you and I got to know each other
Yeah, we
because I
did.
got to know your personal connection to it. But as somebody goes through this, uh, there's a lot of greenwashing out there, and
Mhm.
we're all, and I always make it a point to stop the person who gets out and just starts calling out the companies of greenwashing. This is no longer an option. You're greenwashing. You're doing this. When you're publicly shaming them, all you're doing is pushing them away. All you're doing is simply
Yeah.
saying, you know what, screw this. I don't need this. I'll go back to doing whatever I was doing. And the idea behind this is that we want to be able to move the needle. We want to be able to
Mm.
actually get people. So when it comes to greenwashing versus general operational change, what role do does the travel professionals play as as educators, advocates? What role do they play, and to what degree?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a huge opportunity and a huge, responsibility not to like make that really heavy for anyone, but I think opportunity more than anything to have
Hmm.
these conversations with clients. And I think, it's not about guilt or alienating people. And again, that's
Right.
where I think Travel for Better kind of really fits that mold is that we want everyone to come as they are, come with the knowledge that you have and come with an open mind. And we can have these conversations on our monthly town halls and,
Right.
expose people to different topics, things that go a little bit deeper than that surface level conversation you might just be constantly hearing that may fall under that
Hmm.
greenwashing
Yeah.
category. So I think the reality is that, many of the trips that we're planning for our clients, they create a lot of impact, good and bad. And, whether that's an African safari, Antarctica, the Galapagos, things that require long haul flights,
Right.
um, you know, some of those things are going to come with a larger footprint. So I think the responsibility comes from recognizing that footprint and being intentional about the choices that come
Right.
after that.
Right.
Can you stay longer somewhere? Can you
Hmm.
choose operators who are investing in conservation?
Hmm.
Can you make sure the tourism dollars are helping protect the places that these people have traveled so far to experience? So,
Well, so years ago, I given another talk, and somebody had come up to me afterwards and said, "Well, if this is truly about climate change, then what about airplanes? We shouldn't be getting on airplanes at all. We shouldn't be going anywhere." Okay.
I have a client who's like this too.
Well, and I had an answer for them. And I answered for them, and it took me 3 years to give them the answer. But I went back because I stopped them and I said, "You know what? I'm gonna come back to you with that answer. I don't know when. It could be 6 months. It could be 2 days. It could be 5 years." At the 3-year mark, and it was post-pandemic, I went and I said, "Okay, so you saw what happened when everybody stopped flying. You saw what that looked like. You saw domestic violence increase. You saw suicide rates increase. You saw anxiety levels increase. You saw all sorts of just horrible things come to the surface because as human beings, we're not designed to just simply be in place. There are
Yeah.
three things that we as human beings are not built for. We're not built to be in permanent stress mode. We can't be in fight or flight mode for forever. It's temporary. We can't just sit in one spot. It's just simply the fact that we are, and this is a proven fact, as how we're wired. We are wired as
Yeah.
curious, as being curious. And if that were not true, we wouldn't be eavesdropping. Tabloids wouldn't exist. We wouldn't have pictures of Taylor Swift at every single sporting event as to where she's sitting and what she's wearing and how she's smiling and dancing. And yes, I am a Swiftie. I'm a girl dad. So there's that. So we as human beings are curious. And
Mm.
then the last part is that we as human beings are not designed to just watch suffering and say, ha 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 ha,
Yeah.
as a whole. I'm not saying there are not some people that are, obviously odd. but as a whole, we're not designed for that. I mean, if that was the case, how many people don't like the sight of blood? How many people will see something gruesome and will look away immediately because they're terrified? How many of us jump at horror movies when we watch these slasher flicks in the theaters? We jumped out of our seats.
We're
We're not.
inherently empathetic beings.
That's right. We are. We're inherently empathetic. And everything we do counter to that is trained. Everything that's natural to us is about it being empathetic. Whenever somebody is just not empathetic, is trying to just put somebody down, that's a trained behavior. I had this conversation with my son. He was middle school. We were playing at a soccer game. He used to play soccer, and somebody called him the N-word. I was some rich uppity kid. I call him the N-word, and my son he's a smart ass. He basically looks and says, "No, no, 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 no. My father over there, he's the big guy from Africa. He's the one you got to call that, not me." I looked at him. I said, "Yeah, boy, that's right. That's exactly well done." But you know what? In that moment, do you get mad at that kid for calling your kid the N-word, or do you stop and say, this was trained. Somebody taught this kid that it was okay. No, it's not the first or the last.
Yeah.
So, as you said, as human beings, we're designed to be empathetic. So, if we're designed to be empathetic, then that brings us to this next point: the fact that if we look at a continent like Africa, and we look at the fact that we have altered migration patterns, we have deforestation in the Amazon, we've got all these different things, these climate these accelerating climate feedback loops, right? So everything from melting polar caps to rising heat indexes to deforestation to pollution of waters, you name it, right? Everything is there.
Mhm.
What are we supposed to do?
Yeah. I mean, are we moving fast enough to prevent these things from happening? I mean, of course not. I
Right.
think, fast enough is an impossible standard, but
Right.
I have a hard time envisioning what the world would actually look like if we were fast enough. I think, we're moving faster maybe than we were 5 years ago.
Right.
But I think what gives me hope is that the conversations that used to happen on the fringes are now happening in boardrooms and trade shows,
There you go.
in our advisor communities like Travel for Better.
Right.
That the challenge is scaling those actions, those all these good things like what Big Five is doing on the ground. There's so many companies that have foundations and initiatives to make things better, but that challenge is scaling that fast enough to
Right.
match that pace of change we're
Well,
seeing.
and you said something really key: the fact that those conversations are now entering large corporation boardrooms. They're no longer just
Yeah.
backroom conversations. They're not grassroots conversations. They are actually altering decisions. Case in point, I mean, regardless of what you think of the person, the highest valued IPO in history is about to hit the market in SpaceX as of this
Mhm.
recording. And the number one thing this company, besides Starlink and everything else that this company has achieved, is a booster that can be reused. A
Mhm.
rocket booster that gets reused over and over and over again. This is the electric vehicle. This is, I mean, for whatever you think of Elon Musk, whatever, and personal opinions aside, you can't discredit the fact that he did actually move the needle.
Yeah.
Right? He moved the needle. Whether you love Tesla, hate Tesla, whether you love SpaceX, hate Tesla, whatever the case, remove the politics. He did move the needle. Right?
Mhm.
Is whatever you think about him. I live 2 hours from the Space Coast. I get to watch these rocket launches from the front of my house, and they're every 2 days. There's one, and you get to, on a clear night, you can see the booster land as well. You get to see how it's coming in. Just marveling at it. I never thought in my wildest dreams I'd be able to see this every 2 days. I grew up watching these on TV, going, "Oh my gosh, this is incredible!" Right? So moving
Yeah.
the needle. Uh, but it's one of these things that I think is really important because of the fact that it's the conversation shifting. Are we moving fast enough? Probably not, but we're at least moving. There was a time when we weren't moving.
Yeah. Mhm.
And the ironic part of it is the destinations that luxury travelers and travelers in general love the most are the ones that are the most vulnerable,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's true. Like Africa is a big one, the Mediterranean,
Mm-hmm.
the coral reefs. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, yeah, it's it's really concerning because the temperatures are rising. You hear everybody in the media talking about Venice, like, oh, Venice isn't going to exist in however many years. It's like, well,
Mm-hmm. The
yeah, I
Maldives.
mean, that's obvious. Yeah, the Maldives. I mean, these coastal communities. We're seeing extreme heat impact destinations like Rome and southern Spain in the summer
Mm-hmm.
months, and these destinations aren't necessarily going away, but I still think we're going to see a major shift in when people visit them.
Right.
The coral reef systems, like I just have seen firsthand reefs that are alive and healthy versus those that are bleached and dead. And,
Right.
the warming oceans don't just affect biodiversity, but also the local livelihoods that are tied to tourism in those
Right.
destinations too.
And there are some destinations that are doing some really great work in this. They're
Yeah.
adapting to it. There's some that I've seen, for example, the game viewing happening at night, not in an
Mm,
invasive manner, obviously, being responsible, but doing it there. More adoption of electric vehicles, on
mhm.
safari. More, just different ways to adopt how they're doing how they're doing things. But anything that you've seen, any destinations you can think of that have really done a great job of adapting things the way you'd want them to be adapted, or that you see them actually trying to move the needle?
Yeah, I mean, I don't Africa's an easy answer too. I think, I was just in Kenya in November, and, you have so many choices when you go on an African safari,
Mhm,
and when you pick a safari camp that they're placing a lot of money and a lot of time and effort into training their guides
mhm,
appropriately. They're
mhm.
hiring from, like, the local Maasai communities. It makes a huge impact on the experience that you have as a guest
Right,
and also just on that community too, and, it's not necessarily just about, giving money to a conservation program. It's
right.
about how they're operating holistically too. And I saw that multiple different ways and times in my time in Kenya. So I think they're doing it really well.
And you mentioned something really key there. The just simply giving a donation isn't enough. Like, you go to these grocery stores, like, you want to round up for this charity, you want to round up for that. You feel kind of like an asshole for not doing it, right? Like,
Yeah.
you come away like,
Guilty.
yeah, pretty much. But then you do it, you're like, wait, where did it go? And even if it's 2 cents, like, where did it
Yeah.
go? This isn't about donations. This isn't about that. Look, if you're doing that, fantastic, great. Know where it's going.
Yeah.
It's a whole separate conversation about. But this is about simply moving the needle. It's about simply moving your needle, right? If you care enough about something, that means that. And you've heard this phrase. Oh, if you see something, do something. If you care about something, do something. What does that actually mean? If you see the ability to move the needle somewhere, and you have the means, I don't mean the money, but
Yeah.
you could see the path to how you can move the needle. That could be something as simple as carpooling. That could be something as simple as, where you buy your groceries. Something as simple as what kind of hotel you stay in. Something as simple as what destinations you choose and when you go. Those are decisions that are not going to alter the way you live your life. They're simply decisions that you're making consciously, that you're still going to have an amazing time. You're simply just making a conscious decision about little adjustments that you can make there, and it's not one person, it's one person today, and then another, and then another, and then another, and then another, right? Again,
Mhm.
if enough people, there was like, when I first moved to this country, the first rocket launch I saw was a Challenger shuttle exploding. That was the first thing I saw. I've never saw a rocket launch before. Didn't even know what NASA was. And then there
Mhm.
was all these years about the space program budgets being cut, and the funding's gonna be turned off, and it's gonna be privatized, and this and that. We went from that to now having a company developed a space exploration in a sustainable manner, going public at $1.7 trillion, dollars, the largest IPO in history. Again, put the politics behind as to why it's happening, whether or not it's worth that much, not worth that much. My background's in finance and economics. I can have a separate conversation with anybody about that in terms of valuations. I'm not talking about that. I'm simply talking about the ideology, right?
Yeah.
In terms of it. So if we, let's bring this even to current events. If we talk about, for example, the jet fuel crisis, right? Again, I say crisis with a relative word, because all these airlines talking about jet fuel shortage, and then all of a sudden turn around and say, no, 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 there's no jet fuel shortage. We have enough jet fuel. And then you see them quietly turning off unprofitable routes,
Mhm.
and using force majeure to do it. So there's a whole separate conversation about that. But when we look at this, is sustainable aviation fuel a bridge to this? Is this a wake up call for airlines to start moving towards sustainable aviation fuel?
Think it should be if it's not already.
Yeah,
There's no reason in my mind not to be working towards that. And again, we have a lot of power on the travel advising side of things to promote those flights, those routes, those companies that are investing in sustainable aviation fuels. It's pretty easy to,
Mhm.
do a quick search and find out who's actually making real investments, in those types of fuels and being able to promote those. And oftentimes, when I'm searching for flights, it's maybe just a matter of going out of one hub versus another. It's not
Mhm.
necessarily not a nonstop flight because everybody wants their nonstop flights, but it's just shifting where your travelers are leaving
Sure.
from.
Sure.
So it's a really, in my mind, a pretty approachable and easy way to
Mhm.
help shift our clients too.
And Brazil in particular is leading the way in this conversation about sustainable aviation fuel. We the episode we did with Jennifer, we'll be doing a similar version. Is talking about that SAF option the airlines give you, and that's not actually, offset your flight. That's not actually going where you think it's going. That's not
Mm,
actually benefiting the way you think it's benefiting, and there's a whole controversy behind that. But an actual shift to sustainable aviation fuel, that is something, right? And you
yeah.
could see it happening. I'm not saying for long range, but in Vancouver, in BC, for example, taking those the sea flights, the seaplanes that go between Vancouver Island. Some of them are running electric now. I'm a car guy, so Audi just released a brand new Q7 SUV, and it's a diesel in Europe, and it runs on cooking oil. You know,
That's pretty cool.
and this is a company that was, the poster child for illegal diesels or false information on clean burning diesels, that they were dirty diesels and pollutants, and had a class action lawsuit. You name it, they're not coming up with the diesel that actually is running on cooking oil. So, which means that somebody could be in the wrong one day and try to
Mm.
generally make amends. If they're making amends, I really don't care why they're doing it. If it's to
But
make an
yeah,
increased profit, cool, knock yourself out. As long as the intent is there, that's fine,
yeah,
right?
yeah, and that it's moving towards positive impact instead of negative. That's
It's
great.
it. If your emotional connection to something is that it's going to increase your bottom line, cool. If that's what gives you peace at night, then that's what you go with.
Yeah,
If it's because there's an emotional impact to something in your life and that you believe in strongly, and that purpose comes over everything else, awesome. That's okay too. Not here to judge anybody one way or the other in
yeah.
terms of just a matter of
I have
doing
a client
something.
who feels guilty for flying first class because of
Why?
her carbon footprint that she has. But we're not like with her trips, we're not necessarily doing whatever the carbon offset is through the airline. I'm finding something that really resonates with her as a traveler, her interests,
Mhm.
and making sure we're giving back in some way, whether that's her volunteering her time on her trip or some kind of monetary donation
Mhm.
to something that offsets it in a different way that she
Into
can connect with.
that you
And I
can
think that's
track.
important too.
And
Yeah,
that you can
yeah,
track, exactly.
exactly.
You know,
Hmm.
I did this study with somebody because there was a somebody that was challenging me and saying, well, it's pretty much like, well, if you really think that climate change is real, then we should stop flying. And again, it's that same person who, after the pandemic, basically saying, look, here's what increased. We did a comparison. Let's examine the carbon footprint of your flight with engines getting cleaner and cleaner and cleaner with new planes. And that's again the assumption that airlines are going to retire older planes and move to newer, clean burning engines, newer planes that are more
Yeah.
aerodynamic, that actually, whether it's A350s, Dreamliners, whatever the case, right? But they're shifting to new technology. They're not holding on to 50-year-old planes.
Mhm.
That's that assumption. Delta did a great job of this during the pandemic. They actually retired all their old 777s and brought in A350s. Other airlines are catching up. Other airlines have done this. So we did a track and said, okay, let's take a look at the carbon footprint for those. Let's compare to the carbon footprint if you were to take a car and then take a
Mhm.
boat, and then to any other means besides flying. The carbon footprint of the alternate method to get there, even if it's going across the continent, across the world by boat, was higher
Mm.
because of the wake caused in the ocean, the diesel fuel that was there, the waste that was on the boat, the type, the age of the engine for the cars that were used, the rickety diesels that were used in some poor parts of the world. It was more. So then we said, okay, let's play the other side. Let's say you just don't go, period. The anxiety goes off a cliff, the depression goes off a cliff, the domestic issues go off a cliff, everything just accelerates. Now you
Yeah.
have all sorts of social issues that require more law enforcement, which means more carbon footprints with police cars and first responders. You have more space in hospitals, which require record amounts of lithium and helium for their MRI machines and other natural gases. You then are putting a tax on a burden on municipalities for your care, whether it's through insurance companies, whether it's through state care, and then on your families and their mental imbalance, which then starts this vicious cycle. So by not taking a flight and letting that, and everybody stops flying, and let's say that happens permanently, you actually make things worse on the other side. You
Yeah.
again, the carbon footprint increases. You're at home all day. The AC runs all day at full blast. You're having issues now because you can't socially
You
uh,
can't relate to other people. You're
yeah,
not exposed to other cultures. I mean,
correct, correct,
there's a
correct.
reason people want to travel with their kids and expose them to other destinations and other people.
Right. We are by design curious. And if we weren't, tabloids wouldn't exist. We are
Hmm.
by design curious. There's a reason Taylor Swift has over 1 million fans or 1 billion fans, whatever it is.
I was like a
There,
million. That's way too low.
yeah, as I say, it's 1 billion. Yeah. But there's a reason why she has, as an example, right?
Yeah.
We are by design curious. And I think that's
Mhm.
the important thing. So let's come to our conclusion. Let's talk about this. What are some practical steps that luxury operators, travel advisors on all sides, what can they do in terms of just from community-based conservation funding or wage commitments? What are some things that they could do?
Yeah, I think like at the very basic level, just ask one more question when you're talking with a supplier partner. When
Hmm.
you're evaluating who to work with,
Hmm.
ask how they're supporting their local community, ask how they measure their impact,
Hmm.
ask where the tourism dollars are going. These small questions end up creating better conversations, and better conversations lead to better decision making. So, again, that's exactly what we're trying to help advisors do through Travel for Better's training programs, our resource hub, our monthly town halls, is just
Hmm.
exposing you to different topics and different ways to start those conversations, and thinking about different ways that may resonate with you better, that you can connect with your partners on. And if you don't feel like you have that baseline understanding of where to start, again, that 101 training course is a great place to begin.
And I feel like this child for better applies to everything in life. If you're buying a car, if you're buying a house, buying
Yeah, totally.
appliances, travel, ask one more question and
Hmm.
then ask one more after that. And then one more
Yeah.
after that, and then one more after that. Just ask. I love how that's put because that's, as I know you don't have kids yet, but
No.
with me, I've got a son in college and a daughter who's basically ruling the world right now. So, so, so the thing that actually what was incredible was that she and I had this conversation, and if as parents, my wife and I were talking about this, as parents, we have one job: feed our kids curiosity, feed their curiosity, and that means asking one more question. And that's the same thing that applies as adults. Annie, when we talk about child for better
Mhm.
and this, let's take a minute. Let's just talk about the evolving role of a sustainable advocate like you are. Your program basically turns advisors into advocates, not just advocates for clients, but advocates for doing good.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that in terms of what that looks like.
Yeah. I mean, I think travel is a really unique superpower. When you look at when these trips are taken, it's more about like creating economic value from keeping these places intact, right? And as an advisor, creating this community of people who are going to kind of go forth and promote that in various different
Hmm.
ways. It's exciting to see, that kind of starting to unfold. And I'm really excited for what that future looks like and what kind of impact that we can have as a community. But just talking about like the economic value, a living elephant is worth way more than a poached one. A
Hmm.
healthy reef is worth way more than a damaged one. So I think tourism, when it's done well, it creates a financial reason to protect what makes these places special in the first place, and that's the future that I want to see. And that's ultimately what we're trying to help advisors understand through Travel for Better.
Well, and everybody who goes through this program, and if you want to connect with Annie, it's childforbetter.org, or you can connect to her at telostravel.com. TLEOS, travel.com, or travelforbetter.org. Those two. But really, what I take away from this, and something I believed in, if you're going to make donations, know where they're going. But if you're going to, when it comes to travel, the reason we talk about responsible travel is because that actually is the funding mechanism. You don't need
Mm,
to make a donation if you make wise choices. The
yeah.
trip itself is the donation,
Hmm.
because it is doing the work behind the scenes. It's the funding mechanism. You are the lever. As
Yeah.
travelers, as travel advisors, as travel providers, you are the lever. Your product is the mechanism, the funding mechanism. As travelers, you just make better choices. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And it's the advisor's job to as be an advocate to guide you and teach you how to make better decisions, or you may even know how to make better decisions, but knowing that there is an outlet that allows you to make those better decisions.
Yeah. We have the power to make travel part of the solution.
Right.
Again, it's a superpower, which I think is really incredible. It's
It's
just
what
about
you
the choices that you're making.
it's what you said earlier, right? So it is part of the problem. No denying that it is
Yeah.
part of the problem, but there is a way to make it a bigger part of the solution. And it doesn't just mean, oh, I'm carbon neutral. There's actual fundamental steps that you can take, and it starts with just starting with asking one more question. It's no longer about start a conversation. Now it's join the conversation. The
Hmm.
conversation's been having. It used to be, oh, start the discussion. Start the discussion. No, discussion's been having. It's been happening. It's happening in large
Yeah.
boardrooms. It's happening in small boardrooms. It's happening in backyards. It's happening in bars. Join the conversation. Stop
Join our
politicizing.
monthly town halls. They're a great
Yes,
entry point for that.
absolutely. Join the monthly town halls. Stop trying to politicize it. To all of our world leaders and politicians, you don't know jack about this, and stop pretending like you do. Stop trying to politicize. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. Stop trying to politicize this. Stop trying to tell us why you disagree or agree with it. Cares. Nobody cares. We just want you to listen. That's it.
Yeah.
Just listen. We'll listen to you if you listen to us. That's really what it comes down to. Right.
Hmm.
So until then, stay out of our way. we, we got this. Any any last words that you want to share? I'm going to just talk briefly about the fact that we do have episode 84 coming out after this one. It's going to be talking with Jennifer, talking about sustainable aviation fuel. We're going to be building on this conversation. Is the fuel crisis threatening the skies, or is it actually enabling that change? But is there anything final words that you'd want to add?
Yeah, I think it's don't let the magnitude of the topic deter you from getting involved. It's find your one thing, your entry point, and just start there. It's just about starting at one simple, tiny place. It doesn't have to be something huge, and just go from there. And we're glad to be a support system for anyone that's just starting. You're in it already, and you want like-minded people to chat with. We're open to everyone, so we'd love to support travelers and the travel professionals alike.
I love it. Annie, thanks so much for joining us. It was great. Guys, thank you again for joining us. Remember, like if you like what you heard here, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification. We're adding record numbers of subscribers and listeners, and we'd love to have you join the conversation. Thanks, Annie.
Thanks, Ashish.
Thank you for listening to The Sustainable Voice. If you have a success story of your own, please reach out and share it with us. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time.